The conference room fell silent as Mark Davis stood up, his voice steady despite the trembling in his hands. "Sometimes the hardest choice isn't between right and wrong," he said, looking directly at CEO Victoria Reeves, whose question had stunned the entire executive team. "It's between what's easy and what's necessary." No one could have predicted that this ordinary Tuesday meeting would transform not just a struggling company, but the lives of everyone in that room, especially a single father who had nearly given up on himself. If you're finding yourself drawn into Mark's story already, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more life-changing narratives that might just give you the perspective you need during your own challenging moments. Victoria Reeves hadn't always been the cold, calculating CEO the business world now knew her as. 10 years ago, when she founded Horizon Technologies, her vision had been revolutionary: create software that genuinely improved people's lives while building a company where employees felt valued. But somewhere along the way, between the venture capital rounds, aggressive competitors, and quarterly earnings reports, something had changed. The company was now hemorrhaging talent, their flagship product was falling behind, and the board was growing impatient. Should I change how we operate, or look away from our problems and continue down this path? She had asked her executive team, not really expecting an honest answer. Victoria had grown accustomed to yes men and women who prioritized their careers over candor. Mark Davis had joined Horizon Technologies just 8 months ago as their new marketing director. At 42, he wasn't the young tech prodigy the company typically hired, but his portfolio was impressive enough that Victoria had taken a chance on him. What she didn't know was that Mark had accepted the position out of desperation rather than ambition. 3 years earlier, Mark's world had collapsed when his wife Emma died suddenly from an undiagnosed heart condition, leaving him to raise their daughter Lily, who was now 11. The grief had nearly destroyed him, and he'd lost his previous executive position after months of underperformance and missed deadlines. For 2 years, he'd bounced between consulting gigs, barely keeping their finances afloat, while trying to be both mother and father to a heartbroken little girl. Horizon had been his last chance at stability, a good salary, comprehensive health insurance for Lily's therapy, and most importantly, a fresh start in a new city where the memories didn't haunt every street corner. "I think the question isn't whether you should change or look away," Mark said, surprising himself with his boldness. "It's whether you remember why you started Horizon in the first place." The room tensed. James from finance shifted uncomfortably, while Priya from product development stared intently at her laptop. No one challenged Victoria Reeves, especially not the newest executive who was still on probation. Victoria's expression remained unreadable. "Elaborate, Mr. Davis." Mark took a deep breath. He thought about Lily waiting at after-school care, about the promise he'd made to her that morning that things would be different here, that they could finally put down roots. If he got fired today, he'd have to uproot them again. But something in Victoria's question had struck a chord. It was the same question he'd been asking himself since Emma died. "When I interviewed here, you told me Horizon was founded to bring humanity back to technology. But our latest product decisions have prioritized ad revenue over user experience. We've cut corners on customer support. Our best engineers are leaving because they don't believe in what we're building anymore." The silence in the room was deafening. Mark continued, his voice growing stronger. "I'm new here, so maybe I'm missing something. But from where I sit, we're facing a fundamental choice between who we say we are and who we're becoming." And speaking as someone who's had to rebuild his entire life from scratch, his voice caught slightly. "I can tell you that looking away only delays the inevitable reckoning." Victoria's piercing gaze never left Mark's face. For a terrifying moment, he was certain he'd just sacrificed his job, his stability, and his daughter's security on a foolish impulse. Then Victoria did something no one had seen in years. She smiled, a genuine smile that transformed her face. "Thank you, Mr. Davis," she said quietly. "That's exactly what I needed to hear." What followed was the most extraordinary executive meeting in Horizon's history. Victoria revealed that she'd been wrestling with the company's direction for months, feeling increasingly disconnected from her original mission. She'd called the meeting hoping someone would give her the push she needed to make difficult changes. "Our quarterly numbers look good on paper," she admitted, "but we're building a house of cards. If we continue prioritizing short-term gains over long-term value, we won't have a company worth saving in 2 years. For the next 3 hours, the executive team engaged in the most honest conversation they'd ever had. James from finance admitted they'd been using accounting tricks to make their numbers look better than they were. Priya confessed that their development team was demoralized and that their product roadmap was driven by competitor features rather than user needs. Mark shared insights from his marketing research showing that customer sentiment was declining rapidly, with many longtime users abandoning the platform. But he also presented data suggesting that companies that successfully pivoted back to customer-centric approaches often emerged stronger than before. By the end of the day, Victoria had made a decision. Horizon would undergo a comprehensive transformation, one that would likely mean missing their quarterly targets and potentially angering the board. But it was necessary if they wanted to build a sustainable company that reflected their original values. "I need someone to lead this transformation," Victoria said as the meeting concluded. "Someone who isn't afraid to speak truth to power, who understands what's at stake." She looked directly at Mark. "Would you consider taking on this responsibility?" Mark was stunned. "Me? I've only been here 8 months. Sometimes fresh eyes see most clearly," Victoria replied. "And you've demonstrated something rare today, the courage to risk your own position for the good of the company." Mark thought about what this would mean: longer hours, more responsibility, greater scrutiny. He thought about Lily, who already saw too little of him. But he also thought about the opportunity to help build something meaningful, something he could be proud of when he told his daughter about his day. "I'll do it on one condition," Mark said. "I need to be home for dinner with my daughter at least 4 nights a week. No exceptions." Victoria raised an eyebrow. In the cutthroat tech industry, such a request was almost unheard of. But after a moment, she nodded. "Agreed. Family should never be collateral damage for corporate success. I learned that lesson too late myself." The transformation of Horizon Technologies began the very next day. It wasn't easy. The board pushed back when Victoria presented the new direction. Several executives who preferred the status quo resigned. Their stock price took a hit when they announced revised projections. Mark's new role as transformation director meant rebuilding teams, processes, and in some cases, products from the ground up. There were nights when he questioned whether he'd made the right decision, especially when he'd missed Lily's bedtime despite his best efforts. 3 months into the transformation, Mark was working late at the office when his phone rang. It was Mrs. Chun from next door, who watched Lily when Mark had to work late. "You need to come home," she said, her voice tight with concern. "Lily's having a really bad night." Mark found his daughter curled up on her bed, clutching a photo of her mother. It was the anniversary of Emma's death, and Mark had completely forgotten in the chaos of work. "I hate your new job," Lily sobbed when he tried to comfort her. "You promised things would be different here, but you're never home, just like before." Her words cut through him like a knife. In his determination to succeed at Horizon, to prove himself worthy of Victoria's trust, he'd been breaking his promise to the person who mattered most. The next morning, Mark walked into Victoria's office and placed a letter of resignation on her desk. "What's this?" she asked, genuinely surprised. "I can't do this job and be the father my daughter needs," Mark explained, his voice heavy with regret. "Last night made me realize I'm making the same mistakes that cost me my last position. I'm looking away from what really matters." Victoria didn't pick up the letter. Instead, she asked Mark to sit down and tell her what happened. When he finished his story, she was quiet for a long moment. "Do you know why I asked that question in the meeting 3 months ago?" she finally said. "My husband left me last year. He said I'd become someone he didn't recognize anymore. Someone who was always working, always connected to the office, but disconnected from him. I was so focused on building this company that I didn't notice my marriage crumbling until it was too late." She pushed the resignation letter back toward Mark. "I don't want your resignation. I want us to figure out how to run this company without sacrificing the people we love. Because if we can't do that, what's the point of any of this?" That conversation sparked the second transformation at Horizon, one that would ultimately prove more revolutionary than their business pivot. Victoria and Mark began reimagining what a tech company could look like if it truly valued work-life balance. They implemented flexible working hours and remote work options. They created a family-first policy that encouraged employees to prioritize important family events. Most radically, they established no meeting Wednesdays so team members could focus on deep work and leave on time. The changes weren't just humanitarian, They made business sense. Employee retention improved dramatically. Productivity increased as burnout decreased. The company attracted talented people who had left the industry because they couldn't reconcile their personal lives with traditional tech culture. 6 months into the transformation, Horizon released their redesigned flagship product. It had fewer features than competitors, but addressed user needs more effectively. Customer satisfaction scores soared, and former users began returning to the platform. 1 year after that fateful meeting, Horizon Technologies was featured in a major business magazine as a case study in successful corporate transformation. Their stock had recovered, and then some. Victoria was being hailed as a visionary CEO who had reinvented what tech leadership could look like. But the real victory was much more personal. Mark now coached Lily's soccer team on Tuesday afternoons. Victoria had reconnected with her ex-husband, and while they hadn't reconciled romantically, they had rebuilt a friendship that had once seemed impossible. The most unexpected development came when Victoria invited Mark and Lily to her home for a weekend barbecue. As the adults chatted and the children played, Victoria confided that the board had approached her about taking the company public. "They want us to scale aggressively," she said. "Return to the move fast and break things mentality." "And what do you want?" Mark asked. Victoria watched the children playing in her backyard. Lily alongside Victoria's nieces and nephews and the children of other Horizon employees. "I want to build something that lasts," she said. "Something that makes lives better, including our own." Mark nodded. "Then I think you already know the answer." The following Monday, Victoria declined the board's proposal for an IPO, instead presenting an alternative growth strategy that preserved the company's values and work culture. 2 board members resigned in protest, but the majority supported her vision, impressed by the company's remarkable turnaround. 3 years after Mark stood up in that conference room, Horizon Technologies had become one of the most respected companies in the industry, not just for their products, but for how they operated. They hadn't become the biggest or the most profitable, but they had built something sustainable and meaningful. On the anniversary of that pivotal meeting, Victoria called Mark into her office. Lily, now 14, was with him. It was Bring Your Child to Work Day, another Horizon innovation. "I have something for both of you," Victoria said, handing them an envelope. Inside was a handwritten note and 2 tickets to a father-daughter adventure retreat in Yellowstone National Park. "What's this for?" Mark asked, genuinely confused. 3 years ago, you reminded me why I started this company," Victoria said. "You helped me see that looking away is never the answer, but that change doesn't have to mean losing yourself. This is just a small thank you." As Mark and Lily left Victoria's office, his daughter squeezed his hand. "Dad," she said quietly, "I'm really proud of you." Those 5 words meant more to Mark than any corporate success ever could. He had nearly lost everything by looking away from what mattered. Instead, he had found the courage to speak truth when it was needed, to set boundaries that honored his most important relationship, and to help build a company that valued humanity, both in its products and its people. That night, as Mark tucked Lily into bed, something he never missed now, she asked him a question that stopped him in his tracks. "Do you think Mom would be proud of us?" Mark felt the familiar ache that came with thoughts of Emma, but it was softer now, tempered by time and healing. "I know she would," he said. "She always said that the measure of a good life isn't success or money, but whether you had the courage to live according to your values, especially when it was difficult. Like when you told your boss the truth, even though you might get fired?" Lily asked. Mark smiled. "Exactly like that." As he turned out the light, Mark reflected on the journey of the past 3 years. One moment of courage had changed everything, not just for him and Lily, but for Victoria and hundreds of Horizon employees. It had transformed a toxic corporate culture into one where people could thrive professionally without sacrificing what mattered most. The question Victoria had asked that day, "Should I change or look away?" was one everyone faced at critical junctures. The easy path was always to look away, to continue down familiar roads even when they led to places you didn't want to go. The harder choice, the one that required real courage, was to change, to speak truth, to realign your actions with your deepest values. Mark had made that choice in a moment when he had everything to lose. And in doing so, he had found everything he truly needed. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We share these narratives because we believe in the power of authentic human connection and courage. Sometimes the stories that change us most are the ones that remind us of our capacity to transform not just ourselves, but the world around us, one brave decision at a time. Here is the reflective conclusion and final outro to complete the video narrative, designed to leave the audience with a lasting emotional impact. As the screen fades from Mark and Lily's smiling faces, we are left with the lingering echo of that one powerful question: should I change, or should I look away? It is a question that goes far beyond the walls of a corporate boardroom. It is the question we face when a relationship has grown cold, but we are too afraid to address the silence. It is the question we face when we look in the mirror and realize our habits are hurting our health, yet the comfort of routine is so seductive. It is the question every parent faces when they realize they are missing the fleeting magic of their child's youth for the sake of a paycheck. Mark's story reminds us that the answer to "should I change" is almost always yes. But the reason we hesitate is that change requires a sacrifice. Mark had to sacrifice his sense of security. Victoria had to sacrifice her pride and the illusion of perfection. But by refusing to look away, they gained something far more valuable: integrity, connection, and a life that actually felt good on the inside, not just one that looked good on the outside. We live in a world that often rewards looking away. We are taught to keep our heads down, to not rock the boat, to prioritize the urgent over the important. But as we saw with Horizon Technologies, looking away is a debt that eventually comes due, with interest. Whether it's a company losing its soul or a father losing his connection with his daughter, the cost of ignoring the truth is always higher than the cost of facing it. So, I want to leave you with a challenge today. Is there an area in your life where you have been looking away? Is there a hard conversation you need to have, a boundary you need to set, or a leap of faith you need to take? Remember Mark standing in that conference room, hands trembling, voice steady. He didn't know it would work out. He didn't know he would become a hero. He just knew he couldn't lie to himself or his daughter anymore. You have that same strength within you. You have the power to stop looking away and start changing the narrative of your own life. It might be scary. It might shake the foundation of where you stand right now. But as Mark and Victoria found out, the things that fall away were never meant to stay, and what remains will be stronger than you ever imagined. Thank you for spending this time with us. If Mark's journey touched your heart, or if you've ever had to make a difficult choice between what was easy and what was right, please let us know in the comments below. We read every single story you share, and your experiences inspire this community more than you know. Please don't forget to hit that like button. It helps us get these meaningful stories to the people who need them most. And if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on notifications. We have so many more stories of resilience, love, and transformation coming your way, and we don't want you to miss a single one. Until next time, remember, don't look away. The life you're waiting for is on the other side of the change you're fearing. Take care of yourselves and each other. Goodbye for now.